Paint on my pants already. Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. Today I wanted to tell you guys some tips that I have used to further my portraits like so freaking much. These last couple years, even these last couple months, I have learned so many new techniques that have really pushed my portraits over the top. There's so much that I have to learn, by the way. I'm no expert, but from what I have learned, I have seen such growth that I have to share with you guys. Like we're all in this together, so like my knowledge is your knowledge. So I wanted to show you guys some different tips that I've done that have made my portraits not only quality wise better, but also aesthetically wise better, and just some tips and tricks that I have learned along the way that have just really helped my art. Again, I've told you guys before, I'm a professional artist, but I don't have the educational background as other people, so just keep that in mind. These are things that I personally do and have learned through my personal journey of painting that have helped. So let's just get right into it. I have them in different places. Like I have some on my journal, which I got from Target, and it's so cute. And then I have some on my phone. I'm also going to be in a little bubble hovering around as you guys watch me in my painting process, so you guys can kind of get a feel for what I'm talking about as I talk about it. So my first thing is I paint usually from a base sketch from paint. I typically just go into it with paint and I don't take the time to draw before, and that works for some and some others it doesn't. For me personally, I like a more loose and more fluid way of painting because at the end of the day I feel like it makes my paintings more painty. I don't know if that's a word, but it is now. Painting. I think that it builds character. My goal when I'm painting is not to make it look exactly like my reference photo. When I do color pencil drawings or actual drawings, I try to make them look like the person, like I want them to look realistic. But when I'm painting, I don't. Starting from a sketch on the painting and working from that has really helped me. I have more room to play in the beginning because I'm not as confined to the sketch that's on the canvas or whatever I'm working on. So if you're not used to that, if you're used to sketching a sketch, I would just try it. Just try it and see if you like it. And if you have tried it, comment down below. I would like to know what your experiences were with that. I like sketching from the paint rather than a pre-drawn sketch. My next thing that I feel like has definitely made my portraits and my pieces in general have a better quality is having an underpainting or toning my canvas before I start. I feel like this also makes a good gradient. Just because it looks like the paint has gone through and it's covered the whole canvas, sometimes it doesn't, and there will be cracks amongst the paint that didn't absorb all the way, and through those cracks the underpainting will show. I love color theory, so I try to use the opposite color or the opposite color tones from what the painting will be. So for instance, if I know that my painting is going to be cool toned, then I'll try to do something more warm toned, or even if it's cool toned, again, more on the warmer side. So for instance, this commission that I started for the museum, I know that the majority of it is going to be blue and green and stuff like that. So I decided to use a more purple pink base layer to kind of pull the blues, those kind of colors out more. I have found that helps me. So if I'm doing maybe more of a warm toned piece, then the background will be probably blue or something gray, something more cool toned than just a base white. Also makes me a little bit more intentional with the colors that I'm picking. It just brings those colors forward more and know the richness of the colors you're making when it's not on a plain white background. Because in life, nothing is on a plain white background, even behind me. This is not white, So I wouldn't start my painting on a white background when most of the time in real life, the backgrounds of life are not typically white, even though this is a white wall, it's not white right now, you know? So I don't typically work on a plain white background, and I have found that it really helps my portraits stand out and give them a different life and feel. I love oil paintings, so a lot of these techniques that I use is what I've learned from oil paintings, and I have just transferred them into acrylic paints, which has really helped my abilities. Because again, with acrylic paints, as you guys probably are familiar, they dry so quickly that I cannot. But with oil paintings, I love the feel of oil paintings, and so I do a lot of these things for that look. My next tip is to start from big to small. That means I always start with a bigger brush, and I slowly work my way down to a small brush. Sometimes, especially as of late, I've been using a brush that I feel like is too big, a brush that I wouldn't normally first go to. That's the brush that I pick. And I think even now, like, I've gotten bigger, but I think I could probably start getting even bigger, just to kind of push. First brush is 1, a sketch, and then 2, to figure out my lights and the darks. That's really all that I'm doing with that first brush, is just a sketch and figuring out tones, lights and darks. And it's really kind of just like darks and lights, and I kind of work off that. And I found that the bigger brush, I am more focused on big features that are very prevalent to the portrait or whatever I'm working on. It makes it less stressful when I feel like a big chunk is already covered. So like the nose and the eyes, like I have the eye sockets already mapped out, or the nose in the mouth, like where those are gonna go. When you work in a big brush, just kind of takes the guessing out of where things are gonna go. I mean, you have such a big brush, it's gonna take up a lot of space very quickly, and the more you go down in brush means the closer you're getting to the end and more refined you're getting with the details that you've already put there. There's no guessing of where your features are gonna be because you've already done it. Like the big brush, it already took care of that. Another big thing that I have started to do is wet on wet, wet on dry, and I have found personally that I like to do wet on wet. Basically put like wet paint next to each other and then blend it, just for a better transition, a smoother transition. And if I don't like it, I can kind of keep going wet on wet until it's blended properly. When it comes to shadows though, I do like to do that wet on dry. So for my commission piece, I used wet on dry for the lily pads. I would do the lily pads, wait for them to dry, and then go on wet, that to blend it out basically. And I will again show you guys these as I'm talking, but wet on wet for me is more like oils, in the sense that usually when you're working from oils, they blend for longer. And with acrylic paints, because they dry so fast, you have to kind of figure that out quicker. And unless you want it to dry and are okay with that, but usually you have to learn how to do that. And for me, I use open acrylics because they're like a sweet baby of oils and acrylics, and they don't dry as fast because they have medium in it, which I will get in a second, but they don't dry as fast. So I'm able to do wet on wet longer, and the blending of that is just chef's kiss. Like, so for instance, this portrait right here, you can kind of tell that I can blend for longer, and the gradients that I'm able to do are very seamless. Whereas if I were to let it dry first, it wouldn't be as, they wouldn't blend as well as if I would have waited for it to dry and then gone back and tried to blend it later. Another thing that I feel like has helped my portraits, not using as much black. That is like such a huge thing in the painting community, is don't use black, like never use black. I don't really care. Like if you want to use black, use it. That's why there's black paint to be used. I try not to use black though, because I have found that it is true that you get a much richer tone than if you were to just slap some black on it. And I do use black in my work. Like on occasion. Like if I need to use it, then I will use it, but I try to avoid it if I can. It just gives it, I don't know, this just like richness of your art that usually you can't achieve by just using black. Just try to experiment with that, like test your limits of what the deepest colors you can make or the deepest values you can go without using black first. Like a last resort, if you're like, this just isn't deep enough, then use black to accentuate. Like that's what I do too. If overall the tone is deep enough, but there's some parts where I feel like it could go deeper, then I would use a black. But before we continue, a quick word from our sponsor. Today's sponsor is, it's me. Shameless plug. If you guys aren't aware, I do have an Etsy shop up and running that sells some of my lovely pieces of art. I do have prints on there, I have pins on there, and I am soon going to be releasing some stickers, which I'm so excited about. I also will be releasing some original works soon as well. All of the ones that are on there right now are going to be on a canvas board, so you'll have to frame them. A couple people from my vendor events have showed me some of their framed pieces, and there's nothing more rewarding than seeing you guys like appreciate your prints. That's so awesome. So if you would like to pick up a print today, go to my Etsy shop. It will be linked down below. And yeah, I can't wait for you guys to get your prints. But back to our regular scheduled programming. My next tip is to use layering. Layering is your best friend. Most of the time, you don't go over the whole canvas the first time. Going over your canvas once usually doesn't yield the results that you want, and I have learned that out. Like in the beginning of me painting, I would just paint the whole background blue and call it a day, which it's like you covered it, but you didn't like cover it, you know. And also the richness of the blue or whatever background you're building up could really make a difference. I'm going to show you guys an example of this. So this is my first portrait painting ever. Obviously we can tell that there's a lot wrong with that. But now look at this one. You can just tell from the background alone. Like don't even look at the clear progression of portraiture, but just the background alone, you can tell the richness of this background versus this background. They're completely different, right? Because with this background, I slapped some paint on it and called it a day. But with this one, I built it up and just put more effort and layers into this background, and I feel like you can clearly tell. I would recommend doing that in all aspects of your painting, whether that be your main subject or the background. Building up layers will give it a deeper value, or I should say a richer value, just overall coverage of your canvas. The closer the viewer gets to your piece, no, sorry guys, this light went out, but we're just gonna have to, it's gonna have to be okay. But closer the viewer gets to your piece, the more they'll be able to see that kind of stuff, which, I mean, nobody's gonna be like this close to your painting, I mean, hopefully. But for the most part, the closer people get to your piece, you still want it to look good, right? So I found that layering is your best friend. And the same way that oil is fat over lean, so a lot of oil paintings will start with acrylic and then over top of it go with oils. I use that with oil or with acrylic painting. Basically, I start with thinner layers. The more I build up my layers, the more paint I'm using. These first couple layers, as you guys have seen, are very thin, watered down paint. And then as I get more and more into the painting, the more thicker paint I will use. That really has made a big difference in the quality, again, of my work, is building that up over time and gradually, instead of starting off with just a thick layer of paint. I feel like that has just really helped the biggest with just like my overall presentation and depth of my pieces. Another thing is mixing mediums. I use retarder, but the main majority, like I talked about, is open acrylics. I use open acrylics because they are slow drying, so they last for hours, and if you store them properly, even days. and that's really helpful, especially when you're mixing colors and you found the perfect color and it dries out. That happened to me so much with using just regular acrylics, and I just said no more. I'm not doing this anymore. So I use retarder, open acrylics. My drying time is slower, and also with that drying time on my palette, it also slow drying on my canvas, which means I'm able to blend it for longer. You have room to slow down, which is really beneficial in the painting process, especially when you start to making actual decisions in your art. Like I talked about, I go from big brush to small brush, but once I'm getting to small brush, I need to figure out things more meticulously than before, where I was just kind of getting ideas. Ideas turn into details, and with details, you need to think logically about where you want to put those details. And I have found that it gives me more of a peace of mind when I use mediums and acrylic or open acrylics, because I have room to slow down and take my time. And if I need to put them up or whatever, like I know that they'll still be wet when I come back to that process. And so I could not recommend mediums, slow drying mediums enough. I love it. And for some reason I need something to dry faster, I'll just use straight up acrylics without it, or I won't use open acrylics. I'll use that regular slow drying acrylic. Another thing that I have started to do recently too, because after a couple used paint tubes, and I was like, I'm buying these a lot, like my bank account said stop. You can't do this. I decided to start using thinner washes of paint with regular slow drying acrylics, and then going over them. Like I was talking about fat over lean, I do that with acrylics. So I'll go for regular slow drying acrylics and get the base kind of down, and then I'll use my slow dry as I'm doing details and just like the top layer, so that blending job looks better than the one beneath it, because that one is just kind of an idea of everything, but the top layer is open and it lasts a bit longer as far as like the blending abilities. So I wait until the top layer to use open acrylics, so that top layer that you're seeing looks well blended. Makes the process look just so much better and smoother than using the whole thing in that, because I do that sometimes, but I don't want to use a whole can of paint. Like I'm trying to be frugal. Like let's work smarter, not harder. So that is all though I have to say for today, especially now that my light's gone. I'm sorry guys. I'll do better next time. Let me know if you guys have any other questions. I would love to hear them. Again, I haven't been painting the longest, but from what I have learned, these are the biggest things that I have implemented into my pieces that have really made the biggest difference. Night and day, really. If you guys have made it this far into the video, then I'm assuming that you've already subscribed. But if you forgot, that's okay. I'm here to remind you, go ahead and subscribe. I post weekly videos on painting and mental health, using creativity to help our daily life. If you guys are about that, then definitely consider, again, subscribing. And until next time, bye beautiful people.